Opinions abound regarding America's reputation and position of strength around the world. The right believe we appear weaker since President Obama took office, and the left believe we look more humble. Carl, regarding the recent military advances in Syria by Russia, is it good national policy to consult or partner with Putin in the Middle East? Does he really care what the USA thinks anyway?
Well, the first thing we need to keep in mind is that Putin is an old Cold Warrior. I mean, his background is as a KGB agent. I mean, so you have to treat him and think of him in that regard. And there's a whole lot of us Cold Warriors still hanging around. We should have known what Russia's reaction would be. The Soviet Union had a geopolitical interest in Syria, which has not gone away since the Soviet Union fell apart.
Right.
Russia wants that warm water port that the Syria has always offered it. Russia used to run the Middle East, with the exception of Jordan, Lebanon, and Israel. For decades they ran it, and he wants his influence back. Putin has made no secret of him wanting, Russia's old influence back. We should have known that he was going to come in and help Assad. So the moment we began arming rebels to bring down the government of Syria, we were asking for Russia to come in and counter that move somehow. Now, since we have not armed the rebels to as great an extent as we could have, or we have not acted as
like we did before.
That's right. Or as we have not acted all that decisively in the region, Putin has taken advantage of that and filling that void. He comes up and he says, well, he's only bombing ISIS. Well, that's crap. He's bombing to make sure that Assad stays in power. And Putin couldn't care less about Assad. He just wants control of Syria. So at some point, 2 or 3 years down the road, he could easily move Assad out of power as long as the Kremlin has somebody who they can work with in power. That's all they care about there.
So you said that you used the term indecisive.
We were indecisive.
Relative to Syria. Haven't we been indecisive in virtually every
Everything.
world issue since this man has taken office?
I don't know that we go that far. In terms of every world issue that engages military force, you might be able to make a case for that. I think economically it may be a different story. I think we've been very decisive in terms of Iran. I think we've been very decisive in terms of economic sanctions against Russia and that sort of thing. And that's another reason why Russia is so anxious to act, is their economy is falling apart based in large part on these sanctions placed upon it. And whenever a dictatorship, and that's what Putin is, he's a dictator, whenever a dictatorship starts to have trouble internally, they go to make adventures externally to boost up that personality cult that dictators need. And Putin is very much one of these personality cult types of figures, and the Russian people apparently love it.
Well, and what I would offer to that is it's a two-edged sword, right? So he has been pushing the boundary. And the problem with that is when it comes to our NATO allies, we have an obligation to stand up. So when they're violating Swedish waters, when they're violating Turkish airspace, we have to make it very clear that is unacceptable, and we're going to stand up to them. However, we don't want to get into a war with Russia. And we can argue all day whether that would be a short war, long war, whatever the case is, but the reality is, and I don't think Putin wants to get into war with the United States either, because he knows in the long term he would lose.
But Putin's driving at this point.
He is driving at this point, but here's something I would offer, and something I was thinking about today. We didn't get involved in Syria because we thought it would be a giant quagmire. Do you think it's going to work out any differently for the Russians?
Well,
I think they're going to
that's the Donald
There'll be another
Trump
Afghanistan.
Argument.
Exactly.
That is the Donald Trump argument, and I'm not sure that isn't true. But I'll tell you what,
But I mean, look, at the reason we got involved in Syria to begin with, and I disagree with it, but the reason we got involved with was basically a humanitarian basis.
Right.
I mean, Assad is a cruel dictator.
But to what extent
so if we allow Russia to simply take over, that's certainly not going to change the humanitarian portion of Israel of Syria any.
And we keep drawing these lines in the stand, and Assad keeps walking over them, and then we draw new lines.
Well, I don't think we should have drawn those lines to begin with.
There's an issue when you draw a line and you don't stand up behind it, because then your credibility takes a major hit. And I think one thing that Carl brought up is very much, and this is certainly my background, at least my family background. Vladimir Putin is very much a product of the Cold War. That is his mindset. That's the way he's looking at the world, and everything he's doing is to return the power that he feels and the cadre and the Kremlin feel that Russia has lost.
And
with
there's
the
no
collapse of the
excuse for
Soviet Union.
Washington not realizing that when we have so many Cold Warriors still around ourselves.
And we
but we
certainly
don't realize that.
beat
or
him
at
the
least we
first
don't
time
act like we
around.
do.
You know, we beat him the first time around. We certainly have enough experience on how to beat Russia, and especially with their economy collapsing. I mean, what ended the Cold War? We outspent them in an arms race in the 1980s. We basically bankrupted them because they had to keep up with us.
Star
and they
Wars.
couldn't.
Star Wars is what did it.
Well, you know, and when we think about the fact that we've become militarily weak in the eyes of the world, at least it looks that way anyway to them.
Come on, can't dispute that.
Huh?
Can't dispute that at all. I mean, we have.
I mean, there has to be a time when our president, you know, instead of, you know, coming to the aid of every, and I hate to say this, but you know, every time he speaks about, you know, the Muslim society as a whole, and he uses those who aren't in this country also as he speaks about them. You know, we continue to look like, you know, we're just getting weaker and weaker and weaker because we aren't standing up for the American way of life.
Well, what we need to do is when we draw those lines in the sand, even if they may not be the wisest lines in the sand, we need to back them up.
Oh yeah,
Exactly.
That's the
We're
bottom
gonna draw
line.
them.
Yeah, I don't agree with drawing a line in the sand against Assad at all. But since we did, we needed to back it up.
Right.
And we
Well,
didn't back it up, and Putin is taking advantage of that.
So there's something that I would say to what you said, Bob. This is not an Islamic issue. This is an extremist issue. And we've had extremist issues with other, I mean, again, and I'll go back to this. Oklahoma City was not carried out by Muslims.
okay, but
And they
you
were
can't.
religious extremists.
But our president doesn't even acknowledge extremists.
No, I'm not justifying what he's
that's
doing
what-
as well.
okay, all right.
So, but
What I
what I'm
was
saying
saying.
is we can't draw this in terms of this can't be a religious issue. It's really an issue between the civilized world. In a civilized world, you don't blow people up, you don't behead people, you don't do any of the things. By the same token, our good friend Saudi Arabia just beheaded and crucified 5 or 6 Yemenis a couple of days ago, and they're heading the UN Human Rights Commission for some strange reason. So we have
Go
some
figure.
skeletons in our closet
Wow.
too.
Yeah.
But that goes way before I think our current president.
I think one of the issues with international relations we get in a lot of trouble with is when we throw morality into it. I mean, it was our moral stance that brought the Islamic Republic of Iran into existence to begin with when Jimmy Carter refused to provide CIA support to the Shah, which we had done for decades beforehand. Jimmy Carter decided not to on humanitarian reasons. Theoretically, we went into Iraq for humanitarian reasons as much as anything else, and we screwed that up. Theoretically, we started arming rebels against Assad for humanitarian reasons, and we haven't done that very well either. When you bring morality into international affairs as opposed to national interest, that's when you start asking for trouble. During the Cold War, we backed more dictators than you can count with a stick because they were our dictators.
Up to and including the Shah in Iran.
Yeah, up to including the Shah in Iran.
Right.
And
We
by and
were-
large, we
we
did
were
pretty
Putin.
well with that.
I mean, that's what we were. Yeah.
Well, and we certainly did some horrible things in the process, and I think we also made some mistakes. I mean, let's not forget that this entire issue that we have with Islamic terrorism stems to a large degree by the fact that we didn't back up the promises that we made to the Mujahideen during the Afghan war.
This is
We
true.
created Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda was a CIA funding mechanism to funnel funds from the ISI in Pakistan to the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. We trained these people.
Yep.
Yes.
And then we broke our promises, and then
We broke them a
Well,
second time when we took resources out after we invaded Afghanistan the second time around, or after we invaded Afghanistan after 9/11, we broke our promises when we took those resources away to make the peace and put them in Iraq instead.
Yes.
So we broke our promises to the Afghani people twice.
And we wonder why they don't like us.
Yeah.
I think for the most part they do like us because compared to 30-some years of war and what happened during the Soviet occupation, we're the Boy Scouts in the,
Yeah,
in the process.
this is true.
Well, I'll tell you what, the whole Russian thing just worries me, and I want to know where this ends. How far are we going to let this guy
But we
push
can't afford to
forward?
let him push us a whole lot
No.
more.
Well,
But
I
you
guess
know
we'll
what-
find out come future.
Are you cutting me off again?
I'm cutting you off again, buddy. I'm sorry.
Second time in one
Stay
night.
tuned because last call's next. See you in 3